Hello, guys. Welcome to the webinar 10 to 13 for all those in levels 10 to 13 at my English school. My name is Andre, and I'm originally from the island of Barbados in the Caribbean, and now I'm living in Rome. Now, today we're looking at buying a house. I know it's very difficult at the moment to buy a house because there's no commercial activity going on right now. But when this all is over, maybe we could be able to look effectively in buying a house. So let's begin. So remember, in this focus activity, we're looking at buying a house. We're looking at talking about idyllic homes, looking at estate agents techniques, and choosing a property from a description. Now, what is an idyllic home? Idyllic really means something that's ideal, something that's the best for you. So something that's ideal is something that's important or is the best thing for you. So in this case, we're talking about homes that are the best in your eyes, in your opinion. Okay, so let's begin. House hunting. So house hunting is basically searching for a house, looking to buy a house, maybe looking to rent a house. It depends on your preference. So number one, let's ask these questions. If you were house hunting, what type of house would you look for? Question two, would you prefer to live in the country or in the city? Would you sacrifice size for location? Question three, how many bedrooms would your ideal flat or house have? Number four, where do you go to buy a house? Remember the difference between the UK vocabulary and the US vocabulary. In the UK, they use estate agency or estate agent, and in the US, they use real estate agency or realtor. So that's the difference with the vocabulary between the UK and the US. So let's answer these questions. So number one, if you were house hunting, what type of house would you look for? Well, for me, if I'm house hunting, I'm looking for a pretty big house. A house with many rooms, with many bedrooms, with 2 floors, and a house that has a large open space outside for a garden or maybe for a field. So basically, I'm looking for a large house with many rooms and with a large land surrounding the house, a large area of land surrounding the house. I prefer to have a garden and some place that I can play sports or run around or even plant vegetables or so I love to plant and I love to garden as well. So that's kind of my ideal home as well. Number two, would you prefer to live in the country or in the city? Would you sacrifice size for location? Well, for me, I prefer to live not necessarily in the city or in the country, but maybe in the surrounding area outside of the city, maybe what we call as the suburbs, which is just outside of the city. So for me, I would prefer to live in the suburbs just outside of the city. So at least I'm not too far away from all the amenities, the banks, the supermarkets, etc. And I'm not too close to all the chaos and all the confusion and all the traffic as well. So for me, I would prefer to live in the suburbs just outside of the city. Now, if I had to choose between or sacrifice between location and size, I would sacrifice the size because I think location is very important. I want a good, nice location rather than maybe a large, big house. I can have a smaller house once it's in a good location, but once there are enough rooms and enough land around the house that I can enjoy my life. So I would sacrifice the size for location. I prefer to have a better location than a large house in a terrible location. Now, number three, how many bedrooms would your ideal flat or house have? Now, I prefer a house. I don't prefer a flat or apartment. I think the house would be able to be a little more isolated away from everybody else rather than in an apartment where everyone is in the same building. I prefer to be secluded or isolated away from a lot of people or a lot of apartments. So I would prefer to have maybe about 3 bedrooms in my house. Maybe my friends want to come over, maybe I have family coming over, of course. So I would prefer to have at least 3 rooms in my house. That's my ideal number of bedrooms. And number 4, where do you go to buy a house? Generally, where I'm from, in my country, in Barbados, in the Caribbean, we normally go through a real estate agency or estate agency. But in Barbados, we use real estate agency or realtor. We use the US form in this case. So normally we go to a real estate agent. In some cases, people go on Facebook looking for people that are posting houses for sale, but generally we go through a real estate agency. Could be in person or maybe online. You can find that information in both situations, online and in person. Generally, people go to the real estate agency all over the world to buy a house as well. I know sometimes the cost is usually very high because you have to pay for the real estate agency's fee on top of paying for the house as well. So sometimes it's very expensive, but some people do look for houses on their own. Maybe they look for sale sign, maybe in a location, a neighborhood, and that way they can call a number directly to the owner of the house so that they can create how should I say, a dialogue so that they can do a negotiation between the owner and the person that wants to buy the house rather than going through a real estate agency as well. So that will be cheaper to do because normally with a real estate agent, you have to pay them a fee for looking for a house for you. So those are the different ways that people look for a house or look to buy a house. Okay, great. So let's move on. Real estate euphemisms. Now, often estate agents use euphemisms to make property sound more enticing. So let's match up what the estate agent says to what you think it really means. So euphemisms are normally phrases or words that are used in order to, they're not specifically literal, but they have a different meaning behind them usually. So it's another way of saying something to make it seem better. So something might be horrible, but you use euphemisms to make it seem better than it really is. So in this case, we have some euphemisms. We've got lively area, idyllic, great potential, studio flat, and period property. On the other side, we have the actual meaning. So we have a cupboard, a noisy neighborhood, isolated, more than 10 years old, and a rundown. So let's match the euphemisms to the correct or the real meaning of those phrases or words. So let's look at lively area. So normally when real estate agents are selling a house, they tend to use the euphemisms to make you feel more interested in buying that particular product or in buying the house. So normally a lively area usually means a noisy neighborhood. When you think of lively, you think of, yeah, excitement, a lot of things happening, maybe nightlife, maybe bars, maybe restaurants. So lively area. But generally, lively areas are noisy or chaotic. Yeah. So be very careful when you're looking at advertisements for buying a house because normally they use these euphemisms to entice you to buy or entice you to be interested in the product. So normally when they say lively area, they really mean a noisy neighborhood, which isn't a good thing. Now, idyllic. So idyllic is another euphemism, but what does it really mean? Idyllic, in a lot of cases, means isolated. So idyllic can be a perfect location, an idyllic location, the best location for you. And normally when they say idyllic, they really mean isolated, meaning it's away from everything, maybe in the country, maybe it's far away from all the amenities like the supermarket or the banks. So you have to drive very far to get those amenities or those services. So normally idyllic in some circumstances when they're trying to sell you a house really means it's isolated, it's secluded, there's nothing around. So you have to be very careful with that. Now, great potential. You hear this a lot in advertisement. Oh, this property has great potential. But what does great potential really mean? What it really means is rundown. The property is rundown. Or in other words, the property needs work. It needs to be restructured. It needs to be rebuilt. It needs to be knocked down and built again. So basically, it usually means an old and very old property that needs to be reconstructed or refurbished in this sense. So great potential means it's not fully operational, it's not very well built, or it's very old, and it needs a lot of work being done to it. So in this case, you have to spend even more money trying to reconstruct the house or the apartment or whatever it is. So be very careful with that one. Great potential. It means you have to put a lot of work into rebuilding it as well. Now, the studio flat. When you hear studio flat, it really means a cupboard. When you think of a cupboard, it's something very small and confined, very tiny. So studio flat is usually an apartment that has just one open space. It has no separation between bedroom or a kitchen, or well, the only thing might be the toilet, might be separated, but generally everything is in one space. The living room, the kitchen, the bedroom is in one space. And normally that means it's very small. There's not a lot of space. So when you hear studio flat, studio means an open plan. Basically, everything is in one big space. And for some people, that's not ideal. I lived in a studio flat when I lived in Barbados, and it was very tiny. The kitchen, the bedroom, everything was in the same space. The only thing that was separated was the bathroom. So really, when they say studio flat, they really mean it's a small confined space, one open space with everything in it. And the final one, we have period property, which really means it's more than 10 years old. So period property means it's a very old property. Maybe it's in existence for 10 or more years. So in this case, it could be run down. It could need a lot of work being done to it. So be very careful. If you want something to work on, if you want a house to be worked on, then period property is usually a good start. If you want to put money in investments into rebuilding a house, then a period property is better. But if you're looking for something that you need right away, something new, something modern, a period property is not the best option. So be very careful of these euphemisms because they really mean something different when you really look at it. So remember, a lively area means someplace noisy, someplace chaotic. Idyllic really means isolated and secluded away from everything. Great potential really means it's very old. Maybe it needs a lot of work done. Maybe it needs to be rebuilt or refurbished. Studio flat means it's a small, confined space with everything in one space. And period property means it's a very old property. So if you're looking for something new, this is not for you. It's a very old property. Good. So these are some euphemisms that we use in real estate. So you got to watch out and figure out what the real meaning of these euphemisms are. So real estate euphemisms. So let's continue to match up the estate agent, what the estate agent says to what you think it really means. So we've got cozy, we've got unique, got secluded, basic, good transport, and connections. And here we have the real meanings: unfurnished, cramped or small, yeah, bizarre decoration, meaning a weird or strange decoration. Get used to traffic noise. Yeah, so it's a very noisy area because a lot of traffic. Maybe there's a lot of traffic, maybe there's a lot of the subway, maybe the metro, whatever, the trains. And then we have in the middle of nowhere, meaning it's very isolated away from everything. So let's match up the euphemisms on the left with the real meanings on the right. So the first one, we've got cozy. So a lot of people use cozy loosely. When you think of cozy, you mean someplace very warm and comfortable. But usually for real estate advertising, cozy really means very small or very cramped. It's very tiny space. So cozy means, in this case, very small and very cramped or small or enclosed. So cozy, that's the actual meaning of cozy in the real estate euphemisms. Now we've got unique. Unique is a very common word they use in advertising. Unique. So, oh, this is a nice, maybe it's a nice, different kind of place. But really, when you look at it, it means bizarre decoration. Maybe the inside of the house is decorated in a weird or strange way. Maybe the decor is not very modern, very old and antique. So it depends on your style, it depends on what your preference is, but generally unique in real estate means very strange and weird decorations. Or maybe the house is painted in weird colors, or the house is constructed in a very strange manner. The architecture is weird, so be very careful. Secluded. So we mentioned before in the previous slide that secluded means isolated. It means in the middle of nowhere. So when you see secluded, it means away from everything. No shops, no supermarkets, maybe hardly any people as well. So it's away from everything. Then we have basic. Basic generally means unfurnished. When you see basic furnishings, normally it means, or a basic house or apartment, it means that there's no furniture, no chairs, no refrigerator, no appliances, no beds. You have to buy everything, no TV. So that's what basic means. Nothing included in the house or nothing in the apartment. Now, good transport. Ooh, this house is close to good transport. Yeah, you're saying, yeah, I like this location. It has good transport. But be careful because good transport can also mean a lot of traffic and a lot of noise. Yeah, so which means maybe the subway, maybe the train, maybe on a main street, on a highway. So every night you're trying to sleep, you're hearing the train or you're hearing noise or you're hearing the traffic. So normally when it says good transport, it means be very careful because it could be a lot of noise from the street or from the subway or the train. So that's what they mean by good transport. So be very careful. And the last one, connections. Oh, this house, this area has good connections. So yeah, exactly. So that's transport, good transport connections. I'm sorry. So all that was part of transport. So good transport connections, meaning a lot of noise and a lot of chaos. Now let's look at real estate techniques that they use for real estate. Okay, let me bring up the next slide. So let's read this. So estate agents have to make their houses stand out from others using descriptions alone. They must first entice a future purchaser to the house, and they commonly do this with linguistic devices such as hyperbole and euphemisms, describing the good points of the house to best advantage and trying to make the bad points sound like benefits. Since different kinds of houses appeal to different people, it is not always easy to know which aspects are best to highlight. So the estate agent tends to go for overkill, proclaiming every possible feature as if it were a virtue. So in this case, real estate agents use techniques to help entice you, making something negative sound positive, using hyperboles and euphemisms to encourage you or to make you interested in that particular product or house. So describing the good points of the house to the best advantage and trying to make the bad points sound like benefits is the technique that they use, is using hyperboles and using euphemisms. So let's continue. Let's look at some vocabulary here. So we have stand out, which is a phrasal verb, and stand out means to make it more accessible or to make something more interesting, for it to be at the front of your mind, to make you interested. So making something stand out is making something more appealing or more visible to others. We also have entice. Entice means to attract people, entice people, attract them to buying the product using the specific techniques to entice or to attract people to it. What else? What other vocabulary do we have here? We've got highlight to make something more visible. It's to highlight. And overkill. Overkill is when you're doing too much. You're exaggerating. You're making it seem more than it really is. So overkill also means to exaggerate, to make it more than it really is. So that's what overkill means. Proclaiming is to proclaim something is to make something sound truthful or make something, or you believing something and you're trying to encourage people to believe it. So that's proclaiming. That's what it means. And virtue means true. So every possible feature as if it were true. So virtue means the truth or true. Cool. So let's look at a property auction. Now, a property auction is where they put a house or houses up for auction, meaning you bid on whoever gets the highest price wins the bid and of course can buy the house. So that's what an auction is. An auction is the bidding. Like for example, on eBay, eBay is basically an auction site. You can bid on products. Whoever gets the higher price actually wins that product or buys that product. So that's what a property auction is. It's bidding for property. Now, we must choose a property to buy from the description. That's okay. We don't need to do this one. So we can continue. So let's look at property number one. So property number one, let me see if we can bring up the actual, let me see. Maybe I can't, but that's okay. So when you think of this particular property, so we have property number one. So placed in the prestigious suburbs, this classic 3-bedroom house, arranged over 2 floors, offers well-proportioned basic living space in a lively area. Now, the property comprises a spacious living room opening onto paved area of large private garden, contemporary kitchen, dining room, study, master bedroom suite, 2 guest bedrooms, and 2 bathrooms. Churchmount benefits from its, well, that's the name of the area. Churchmount benefits from its close proximity to Monterey and Reeve Heights golf clubs. So in this case, they're using some euphemisms and hyperboles to get you interested in this property. So we got prestigious suburbs. When you think of prestigious, what do you think of? For me, I think of rich, someplace where a lot of rich people are. So when you think of someplace where rich people are, it really means someplace very expensive. So when you hear prestigious suburbs, it means the price of that property is very expensive. So that's another euphemism that they use to make you interested in the property. So prestigious in real terms means very expensive. Now they said this classic 3-bedroom house arranged over 2 floors offers well-proportioned basic living space in a lively area. So here again, we have lively area. So in this case, lively area means very noisy. So yeah, so maybe we need to avoid this particular property. So very lively means, in this case, very noisy. Now the property comprises a spacious living room opening onto paved area of a large private garden, contemporary kitchen, dining room, study, master bedroom suite, 2 guest bedrooms, and 2 bathrooms. Now, the Churchmount benefits from its close proximity to Monterey and Reeve Heights golf clubs. So again, when you hear it's close to a golf club, you know it's very expensive as well. And maybe not necessarily close or right next to the golf club that you can be able to play golf. Maybe it's maybe a kilometer away. So when you think of close proximity, it doesn't always mean right next to. It can mean a little distance away from, but maybe in the same area. So be very careful when I say close proximity, because it might not be very close. It might not be very close. Might be still a little distance away, but maybe in the same area. And they entice you by saying, oh, it's close to the golf clubs. Yeah. But do you have access to the golf club? That is the question. Maybe you have to pay a lot of money to join the golf club. So remember, it's in a prestigious area, which is very expensive and close to a golf club. Maybe it's not that close, but maybe it's a little distance away from the golf club as well. So be very careful of those specific euphemisms that can encourage you into a false sense of security when it comes to buying a property. Let's look at another property now. Okay. We've got property number 2, a rare opportunity to purchase a custom cottage in a stunning location. Perched on the edge of a cliff, you'll be greeted every morning by the soothing sound of ocean and have endless opportunities to gaze at the beautiful horizon. This cozy and unique property offers the opportunity for a peaceful way of life. Only a 15-minute drive to the quaint local village, you really can live the best of both worlds. Interesting one. So this will appeal to people that like nature, that like quiet, that like serenity, and. So here, the first thing we have, a rare opportunity to purchase a custom cottage. So when you hear cottage, you hear of a small little structure, maybe in the forest or in the woods, and it's very small. It's not a big building. So in this case, a custom cottage can mean a very small structure. Good. In a stunning location. Yeah, maybe it's correct. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful location. A lot of scenery, a lot of nature. Yeah. Perched on the edge of a cliff, meaning it's on the edge. It's high on the edge of a cliff. And normally, as a cliff, on a cliff, it's very high. So maybe you have to travel a very, how should I say, a very steep climb up a hill or up a mountain. So that can be very stressful, having to drive up a mountain or drive up a high ascent or very steep hill or mountain. So be very careful. Perch on a cliff, maybe it's very good views, but the time to get there and of course the effort to get to that cliff might be very difficult as well. So next, you'll be greeted every morning by the soothing sound of the ocean and have endless opportunities to gaze at the beautiful horizon. Now, maybe that's true. Yeah, maybe you have those beautiful views. So next, they say, this cozy and unique property offers the opportunity for a peaceful way of life. So here we have a euphemism, cozy. What does cozy mean? Cozy, as we said before, means very small, like a cupboard, very confined and very small. It might be comfortable for some people, but it's very small. So when you think of cottage and when you think of cozy, it is usually a structure that's very small and confined. So maybe, if you're not the type of person that likes small spaces, maybe it's not for you. They say a unique property. So again, unique. Maybe it has weird decorations, or maybe the structure is very weird or strange. So unique, another euphemism. And they say the opportunity for a peaceful way of life. A peaceful way of life. So you're thinking about quiet, you're thinking about away from everything, you're thinking about isolated, because normally in an isolated area or a secluded area, it's normally very quiet and very distant from everything else. So when you're thinking about this property, think about the distance away from everything. Yeah. And they go on to say it's a 15-minute drive, still a little distance, a 15-minute drive from a quaint local village. And a village is a very small area, doesn't have many amenities or many services. Maybe there isn't really many restaurants, or maybe there aren't any supermarkets. Maybe there's a village shop, but maybe a lot of services are not available because normally a village is a very small area with mainly houses and not many services or amenities. So when you're thinking about this property, think that you don't have a lot of these services to use in a village. And here you can really live the best of both worlds. Yeah. The only world I can see here is that it's secluded, it's natural, maybe it's quiet, but there are not a lot of services or places you can buy stuff. So in this case, for me, I don't know if I would like this property. Let's continue with property number 3. This is our last property. So this is a property of great potential with peculiar grace and distinction, situated in a quiet, idyllic location and only a 10-minute drive from the thriving town of Tweethorn. I think that's how you pronounce it. You couldn't ask for a better location. This elegant 8-bedroomed residence is magnificently furnished, and the many windows provide all the rooms with an abundance of light. It also includes a sweeping private garden, making it an ideal family home. Sounds interesting, right? So it sounds like a very nice investment to make, a very nice house to buy or property to buy. So in the beginning, they say this is a property of great potential. Remember, when they say great potential, it normally means it needs a lot of work being done. So you have to spend money on reconstruction, on refurbishing the property. So in this case, maybe might not be good because it might be an older structure, or maybe it had been destroyed, or maybe it needs a lot of work being done to it. So that's the first point. They say with peculiar grace and distinction, peculiar. And normally, peculiar means very unique and strange, maybe weird architecture or weird or strange decorations. So be very careful. Peculiar grace and distinction. When I hear that, I think of someplace very old, someplace very antique and old and dusty and needs a lot of work. So in this case, maybe grace and distinction could mean someplace very old and needs a lot of work. Situated in a quiet, idyllic location. In this case, it's isolated or is it secluded, meaning it's away from everything. Yeah? And only a 10-minute drive from the thriving town of Tweethorn. You couldn't ask for a better location. So it's not quite in the town, it's outside of the town. So maybe, obviously, you have to drive 10 minutes to get to the town to, of course, go to the supermarket or go to the pharmacy or go to certain locations or use certain services. So in this case, maybe it's not the best location because it's away from everything, basically. And you have to drive a little while to get to the town to take advantage of the services there. Now, they continue to say this elegant 8-bedroom residence is magnificently furnished, and the many windows provide all the rooms with an abundance of light. Now, in this case, we see that it's a large house because it has 8 bedrooms. Maybe it was a hostel, or maybe it was an old hotel, or maybe someplace that, yeah, as I said, like a hostel or something, or bed and breakfast, maybe. So originally it might have been one of those properties that, of course, was probably built for hospitality, per se. So 8 bedrooms is pretty big, yeah. They say it's magnificently furnished. So we heard about great potential. We heard about peculiar grace and distinction. We think about idyllic location. To me, it sounds like someplace very old, with very old furniture, not very modern. So magnificently furnished could mean very old furnishings or decor. It has many windows, which is good for light, of course. It also includes a sweeping private garden, making it an ideal family home. So a sweeping private garden means a very large private garden. So sweeping means very large or big area. So in this case, it may be a large garden, but when you think of a potential property, an old property, maybe someone's not taking care of the property. Maybe the gardening is terrible. Maybe all the plants have died. Maybe you have to get someone to do landscaping to get the garden beautiful again. So with all of that, it might be a large garden that does not get the attention that it needs. So maybe you have to do a lot of work in maintaining the garden as well. So think about that when buying this house. And yeah, so they say it's a good property for family. So you see here, maybe it's a big property with a lot of rooms, but it needs a lot of work being done, or it needs to be refurbished or reconstructed. It's in an isolated or secluded area away from everything. Maybe inside the furnishings are very old, they're not very modern, you have to buy new furniture. So for me, I would not purchase this property because unless you're looking to make an investment into a hostel or hotel or bread and breakfast, it's a good property for that. But for a house, maybe it's not the best option. So remember, when looking at properties or when looking to buy properties, you have to be very careful about the words that are used in the advertisements, especially the euphemisms that a lot of real estate agents use to make something more appealing or to entice you or make you interested in that property. So remember, we have the euphemisms like, for example, let's go back. You have the euphemisms like cozy, which means very small, very cramped. You have unique, which means bizarre or strange or weird decoration. Secluded means away from everything, isolated, in the middle of nowhere. Basic means no furniture, it's unfurnished, no television, no chairs, no tables. Good transport connections usually means it's someplace close to a train station or maybe a bus station, or maybe there's a lot of traffic on a highway. So not normally it means someplace that has a lot of traffic and a lot of noise. We also remember have lively area, which kind of means noisy neighborhood, a lot of activity, mean it's chaotic. Idyllic means, again, isolated or secluded, away from everything. Great potential means you need to do a lot of work. Maybe it's run down, maybe it's was destroyed and you need to build it from the start. Studio flat means a small open space where everything is in that space, the kitchen, the bedroom, everything is in one area. And period property means an old property that's older than 10 years. So normally it's a rundown old property that maybe you have to do a lot of work with. So remember those euphemisms that we use, that real estate agents use when trying to sell a house. Be very careful when you're buying a house because they can be very tricky with the words. They're trying to make you very interested in the property. So be very careful and look for those euphemisms that can give you an idea about really and truly what the property is, or even for a product as well, any product. Maybe they're describing a product. So be very careful of those euphemisms. Okay, guys, that's all. See you later. Thanks for joining us. And of course, stay tuned to the YouTube channel for more webinars from My English School. And of course, stay tuned to our social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook, for more information. And I want you guys to stay safe and stay indoors unless it's very necessary to go out. And keep learning English, guys. See you later.